Strangers in black SUVs showed up demanding the baby elephant, as if he were nothing more than property. No badges, no compassion, just threats and cold eyes fueled by greed. But Michael Banks wasn't about to let them win, and he had one move they didn't see coming. Just wait until you hear how this unbelievable standoff ended, and how justice finally took the lead. Michael Banks hadn't come to Montana for adventure, he came to disappear. A 42-year-old widower and former paramedic, Michael left behind a life that had once felt full, until his wife's sudden passing left it gutted and hollow. No sirens, no city lights, just the kind of quiet that echoed inside your bones. He'd traded his scrubs for flannel, his clinic for the canopy. Now, his world was a rustic cabin tucked deep in the woods, an old pickup that rattled more than it rolled, and miles of untamed forest in every direction. Most days passed like whispered chapters in a forgotten book, feeding the birds, splitting wood, jotting wildlife notes in a weather-worn journal. His only neighbors were elk, foxes, and the occasional bear print left in the mud near the stream. Montana didn't ask questions. That's why he came. So when a low rustle broke the evening stillness one overcast afternoon, Michael's first instinct wasn't fear. It was curiosity. Then came the cracking of branches, louder now. He stood, hand lightly resting on the porch railing, scanning the tree line. Something was coming. Something big. A strange, snorting grunt followed, a sound completely alien to these woods, and then, from behind the thinning pines, it stepped out. An elephant. Not just any elephant. An African elephant. Towering, powerful, and impossibly out of place. And she wasn't alone. Draped gently in her trunk was a baby, a calf that looked like it could barely stand. Its legs trembled with each motion. Its side was streaked with dried mud and scrapes. Michael's breath caught. He was staring at something that shouldn't exist here, not in Montana, not in this quiet corner of the world. The mother elephant moved with slow, deliberate care. She crossed the clearing toward the cabin, her massive frame impossibly silent given her size. She reached the edge of the porch, lowered her trunk, and placed the calf onto the wooden planks. Then, without a sound, she stepped back. Her eyes locked with Michael's, not wild, not hostile, but calm, almost pleading. The calf collapsed, chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. Michael hesitated only for a second. Whatever disbelief tried to hold him still was instantly crushed by instinct. Training kicked in. He dropped to his knees, eyes scanning the tiny body for injuries. A gash along the ribcage, bruising, signs of severe exhaustion. This baby was in real trouble. He spoke softly as he worked, partly to soothe the animal, partly to steady his own hands. The mother didn't move. She didn't trumpet, didn't threaten. She simply watched as if she'd made a choice and trusted a stranger with everything she had left. Hours passed. Darkness crept in. He brought water, warmed blankets, applied what care he could with what little medical supplies he still kept in a wooden box under the stairs. And through it all, the mother elephant stayed, silent, patient. By morning, she was gone, vanished into the forest like a dream dissolving at dawn. No sound, no tracks, just empty space where something impossible had stood. All that remained was the calf, wounded, breathing, and now completely in Michael's care. He looked down at the baby lying beside the porch railing, watched the soft rise and fall of its chest, the slow blink of eyes that seemed to hold a story far older than its weeks of life. Something had changed. Something had begun. And Michael knew it. That moment, that silent choice between a wild creature and a broken man, was going to alter everything. Michael had seen strange things in his years as a paramedic, but this defied everything. As the days passed and the young elephant slowly regained strength, a question began to circle his thoughts like a hawk overhead. Where did they come from? An elephant. In Montana. It sounded like a misprint. The nearest zoo was over 300 miles away, and none of the local wildlife officials or animal sanctuaries had reported an escape. He made the calls anyway. Conservation groups, park services, anyone who might know something. Every answer was the same: silence, confusion, disbelief. According to every source he could find, there were no missing elephants in the entire Northwest. It was as if the mother and her calf had stepped out of thin air, but Michael couldn't let go of it. There had to be a story behind this, something real. Meanwhile, the calf, whom Michael had begun calling Neil, was beginning to recover. Slowly, yes, but steadily. Michael had built a makeshift pen using old fencing and blankets, set up heat lamps for warmth, and mixed formula from powdered milk and electrolytes based on guides he found online. Every wound was treated, every fever watched. What he lacked in resources, he made up for in care. And he talked. Not because he expected an answer, but because it helped him cope. "You know," he muttered one afternoon while applying antiseptic to Neil's side, "you're the quietest roommate I've ever had." The calf blinked slowly, eyes locking onto Michael's. It wasn't just instinct or accident. There was something in that gaze, a calm, a connection, a depth, as if the little elephant understood. One night, while digging through an old wooden chest he hadn't touched in years, mostly filled with newspapers, receipts, and dog-eared manuals, Michael found something that stopped him cold. An article, yellowed at the corners, dated 6 years prior. The headline read, "Illegal wildlife transport bust in Wyoming. Dozens of endangered animals discovered." He sat down, the paper trembling in his hands. According to the story, a private cargo truck had been intercepted crossing state lines carrying a dozen exotic animals: leopards, parrots, even a giraffe. Many were too weak to survive. Some vanished during the chaos. Among them was one entry that pulled the air straight from Michael's lungs: a female African elephant. Name, Kalima. Distinctive marking, tattoo on left ear. Last known trace, Montana wilderness. Year, 2019. Michael stared at the grainy photo that accompanied the article. It was her, the same shape, the same intelligent eyes. And then he saw it. The faint, almost unreadable tattoo on her left ear. His heart pounded as he stepped outside with a flashlight and gently approached Neil, who was resting in a bed of hay. Carefully, he lifted the calf's ear. There it was, the same mark. Everything fell into place with an eerie precision. Kalima had escaped. Somehow, she had survived the wilderness, outlived the odds, and carried a secret with her. She hadn't just trusted Michael by chance. She had brought her child to the only safe place she could find. But now, a deeper truth settled in Michael's chest like a stone. If he had found this article, someone else could too. Someone who might not be so kind. And if they came looking, Michael knew, they wouldn't be asking politely. A week later, the silence broke. 3 black SUVs pulled up to Michael's cabin. 4 men stepped out, no uniforms, no badges, just dark coats, mirrored glasses, and one cold voice. "We're with CTC Global. Hand over the animal." No paperwork, no explanation, just a demand. Michael didn't need one, he knew. These weren't rescuers. They were part of something darker. Neil wasn't a calf to them. He was worth a fortune, and they'd come to collect. Michael refused. One of the men reached into his coat, revealing a stun device. But before he could move, distant sirens split the still air. Sheriff Carter's patrol cars rolled in fast, lights flashing, engines roaring. Within seconds, the men from CTC were handcuffed and pinned. It turned out CTC Global was a front, part of a long-running investigation into wildlife trafficking. But until now, no one could prove it. Kalima and Neil changed that. Their scars, their markings, their story. They became the evidence that cracked the case wide open. Neil was moved to a protected sanctuary where he could live safely. Michael was awarded for his role in saving them, but he didn't need the praise. He'd found something greater, purpose. And one snowy afternoon, months later, Neil returned for a visit, stronger, taller. He gently touched Michael's shoulder with his trunk. Then beyond the trees she appeared, Kalima, watching still, one last time. And then, like before, she vanished into the forest, but not before changing everything.